Cohesion is one of the important concepts when it comes to software engineering and software development. Yet, this is one of the most misunderstood concept as well. By the end of this video, I want to give you an intuition and mental model for what cohesion means and what a good cohesion is and what a bad cohesion is. I want to give you that level of understanding by the end of this video. Let's first start with the definition of cohesion. What is cohesion? Cohesion is defined as how related the pieces or items within a module are. So it is a property or it is a measure which indicates how related the component or pieces within a module is. Okay. So for this, first we need to understand what a module is, right? So that's where we need to start. So when we say module, module could be anything. It is up to you to define what a module is. Module could be a class if you are in an object oriented paradigm. It could be something like package. So this will be more applicable for uh, platforms and programming languages like Python or Golang, or even in an object oriented paradigm. Package can be a module or a project can be a module. So it is up to you to define what a module is. There is no size definition for module itself. You can define whatever as a module. So it could be a class or it could be much bigger than that as well. But what is more important is the intent or purpose or responsibility of that module. So if you have a module, you need to clearly define its intent or responsibility or its purpose. So this is the important thing. Once you have a module, you should be able to clearly define its intent, responsibility, or purpose. With that, you should be able to clearly define what belongs in that model. Sorry, what belongs in that module. Okay, and you should also be able to clarify or articulate what doesn't belong in that module. So this is more important than what belongs. So what doesn't belong is more important. You should be able to clearly articulate what doesn't belong in that module. So that is how a module is defined. You need to have a clearly defined responsibility, purpose, or intent, and with that you should be able to clearly define what belongs in that module and what doesn't belong in that module. So this is the important thing. Once you have done that, it makes it easier for you to define what goes in that module and what shouldn't or what doesn't go in that module. This will automatically make your module more cohesive, because what we saw previously, cohesion is all about how related the things, like the items and pieces that you have in your module are. If they are unrelated, then your module is not a cohesive module. But if they are highly related, then they are cohesive module. But how do you define that relatedness? You understand its intent and purpose, right? Now the relatedness is basically derived from that. Whatever you put inside that module has to be related to or has to be there to fulfill the purpose or responsibility or intent of that module. Okay, so this is the important thing. So if we take an example, let's say for example I'm going to create a class called a string utility. Okay, string util. Now I could argue that this is a cohesive module as long as I have clearly defined its intent or purpose as a place where I keep all string operations, like string related operations like concatenation, changing it to uppercase, lowercase, title case. So as long as I have clearly defined its intent, responsibility, or purpose, then this module is a cohesive module as long as I have all the methods in it are there to achieve that intent or purpose. Okay, so we could also have something like notification service. This is again, I can say that this is a cohesive module as long as I have defined its intent and all the methods that are within that particular service is there to achieve that intent or purpose. Okay, so I can have methods like send SMS, send email, send push notification, all of them can be part of that module as long as I have defined the purpose of that module as a notification module which sends notification to our customers. Okay. Now we'll see what is not a good example for cohesive module. Let's say for example, so these are actually good examples. Now what is a bad example? So if we take an example of util class, okay, let's say for example I have a class called utils. This is not a cohesive module, like, because it the name implies that we can put any sort of utilities there. We cannot define its purpose clearly, right? So even if we say the purpose of this is to keep all sort of utilities, this is not strong enough, because we can say what belongs in it, but we can't say what doesn't belong in it, right? So if it is a utility class and its definition is that it is going to have all sort of utilities, then how do you define what doesn't belong in it? So because of that, this is not a good module. This is not a cohesive module. By the way, I'm actually using classes as an example here, but it doesn't have to be classes. There are a lot of programming paradigm where we don't have a concept of class. We have many programming paradigm which is not object oriented. So when we talk about module, like I said previously, it doesn't have to be class. It could be any size or anything. It could be a class, package, project, but it needs to have a clearly defined purpose. That is the main thing. And let's see one more example for what is not a good module or cohesive module. Let's say for example we have something called student related stuff. This is not a cohesive module again, because one could define the purpose of this module as a place where we can dump all student related functionality. If that is the case, it is very vague and it is open for interpretation. It is very hard to define what doesn't belong in this module, right? So we can actually put student attendance tracking, students' personal information, anything related to student can go in here. So it is kind of a convoluted module which doesn't have a clearly defined single purpose. So that is the most important thing that I've missed earlier, which is the purpose has to be a single purpose. Okay, so it has to be single purpose. It shouldn't be doing too many things. That is one of the important thing. Okay, but if we take this example, student related stuff, this is going to have many things in it, many things related to student, so that directly violates one of the definition of a module. So this is not a good module. There is often a misunderstanding or confusion that when we are talking about a module, it has to be self-sufficient. That is not true. So if we take notification service, it's not that we need to have all the functionality related to notification service inside this module, because because self-sufficiency is not a property of cohesion. A module can have missing items, but still it can be a highly cohesive module. It is not about what is missing in that module. It is all about whether the things that are there in the module are related to the purpose of that module. Okay, let's say for example we want to access some database to read some existing notifications that we have sent, then that doesn't have to belong in this module itself. It can be part of some other module and this module can call into it. That won't make this module a less cohesive module, because now it doesn't have all the pieces or parts required for sending notification. That is not true, right? So cohesion is not about self-sufficiency. So let me just make it really clear. Self-sufficiency is not cohesion. So this is an important thing. Now, this is not a new concept, by the way. Cohesion is not a new concept. This was coined by Larry Constantine in 1960s. Okay, so this was coined by Larry Constantine in 1960s. 1960s, it was coined by Larry Constantine. Later, in 1979, this was formalized by both Larry Constantine and Ed Uerdon in their book called Structured Design. So this book came out in 1979 and this was authored by Larry Constantine and Ed Uerdon. They both formally defined what cohesion means in that book. Okay, so this is really important because people think that cohesion is a new concept or it was a very recent concept, but it is not. It is nearly 55 years old concept, okay, or 50 years old concept at least. Now, there is a related concept called coupling, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. I'll create a new video for that, but I hope I gave you a good intuition for what cohesion means, what is a good cohesion and what is a bad cohesion. That is all I wanted to cover in this video. I'll see you in the next one.